Good morning and welcome to part 2 of our People Intelligence Social Emotional Learning Professional Development, where we are focusing on being contagiously positive by offering excellent customer service. My name is Kristen Martin and I'm one of the assistant principals at Schmucker Middle School, and I'm feeling pretty thankful to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for all of the work and the time that you've put in to completing these professional development experiences. So just as a reminder, people intelligence, simply put, are people skills. According to Forbes, people skills means having purposeful intention to engage with and become more aware of differences. It is being aware of all of the different types of people and how we can be more effective at connecting with them. The key piece here is that connection. Great customer service is a model for success and requires a certain understanding of people skills. So in order to start building relationships and our people intelligence skills, we're going to be looking at how we can be contagiously positive in order to offer good customer service. Just like in part 1, today's SELPD is largely based on the book Captivate, The Science of Succeeding with People by Vanessa Van Edwards, and it will be the framework as we share information related to recognizing hidden emotions, getting along with almost everyone, and how to positively handle difficult people and or situations. We did not review the entire book, so if you're interested, please feel free to check out the book. It is not required, but you may find it interesting. I know that I really enjoyed reading through it as I was preparing for this PD. So our learning objectives are the same, with understanding the life hacks as it relates to customer service, communication, both verbal and nonverbal, understanding of reading emotions and getting along with others, understanding how to build contagious positivity, being likable, sparking up conversations. Our agenda for today is really going to focus on 3 things: hidden emotions as identified through micro expressions, getting along with almost anyone and how to respond, and then how to positively work with difficult people or situations. Again, this social emotional learning PD directly correlates with our CASEL standards, and it hits with many of the competencies. The top hits are insight and self-awareness, collaboration and relationship skills, connection and social awareness, and then it also touches on regulation, self-management, and mindset. So today's presentation will be really about the people intelligence with a focus on interacting with others. When trying to better understand your people intelligence and your interactions with others, it's important to remember that we all have hidden emotions disguised through micro expressions. So a micro expression is a brief, involuntary facial expression that humans make when they feel an intense emotion. Vanessa Van Edwards shares that everyone falls prey to the same 7 facial tells, which is why we can spot them, because we can identify them and kind of put them into those 7 categories. The 7 micro expressions that often help people uncover the truth include anger, contempt, happiness, fear, surprise, disgust, and sadness. So we're going to go through each of those and kind of look at how those micro expressions are marked and then in what situations we might see them. So the first is anger. So the anger micro expression is marked by lowered eyebrows that are pinched together, 2 vertical creases in between the eyebrows, tensing of the lower eyelids, tightening of the lips, either pressed firmly together or in a position to yell. And then you might often see anger micro expression during a confrontation, when delivering bad news, before an argument or fight. And then they also include photo alerts, which I think is kind of interesting. And the photo alert for anger would be maybe accidentally in a profile photo when someone is squinting into the sun or does not like being in front of the camera. That's when you also might spot that anger micro expression. The next is contempt. So the contempt micro expression is marked by a one-sided cheek lift, almost like in dismay, and then pulling up the right or left corner of the mouth, one or the other, not both. And so you might often see a contempt micro expression if you tell someone no, when someone hears or encounters something they don't like, or during a disagreement or after being kind of put down. The photo alert here would be accidentally in a profile picture where someone thinks it means a partial smile. Moving on to the next would be happiness. So the happiness microexpression is marked by the corners of the lips equally pulled up on both sides, possible lip parting with teeth visible, engaged upper cheek muscles, wrinkling along the sides of the eyes. You might often see the happiness microexpression in the following situations: when celebrating with someone, when delivering good news, or perhaps just during a pleasant or positive experience. The fourth microexpression is fear. So that fear is marked by widened eyes, lifting of the upper eyelids, elevated eyebrows with horizontal lines in the center of the forehead, and then perhaps even a slightly opened mouth. You might see this fear microexpression during the following situations: during a dangerous situation, when you give someone difficult information, in an unknown or confusing interaction. And then how to spot this, maybe in the photo alert, would be in a picture when a flash blinds someone or when they're nervous being photographed. The next is surprise, and the surprise microexpression is marked by raised, rounded eyebrows, widened eyes, dropped open jaw, or an intake of breath. And you might see this microexpression when delivering unexpected news, sharing a story with a shocking ending, when someone is amazed or in awe. The photo alert here would be in a picture when someone is ambushed by the camera. The next microexpression is disgust, and this can be marked by the wrinkling of the upper nose, lifting of the upper lip, raising of the cheeks, or tightening of the lower lid. And you often see a disgust microexpression in the following situations: when someone smells or tastes something bad, if they don't like a person or an idea that's presented, perhaps during an unpleasant interaction. And the photo alert for disgust is in a picture if they're trying to force themselves to look happy but hate being photographed. And the last hidden emotion is sadness. And sadness microexpression is marked by the corners of the eyebrows being pinched together, drooping of the eyelids, puffing or pouting of the lower lip, or pulling the corners of the mouth down into a frown. And you often see sadness microexpression in the following situations: when someone is disappointed, right before they're about to cry, if they're overwhelmed or upset. What's also interesting is that in addition to our interactive expressions, we also have a digital microexpression. And as Dr. Sears noted earlier, we have 2 seconds to make a first impression, which compared to our digital first impression is a luxury. A Princeton University researcher, Dr. Tordov, found that people make a snap judgment about someone online within 100 milliseconds of seeing their picture. The good news here, as kind of, presented by Vanessa Van Edwards, is that we are in control of the messages that we send in our photos. Moving on to how we respond to hidden emotions. Being able to recognize those microexpressions will help decode the truth, and the meaning is important, but how we respond to them is equally as important when effectively interacting with others. So when thinking about how we respond to certain emotions, we can follow these guidelines. So when we are responding to anger, it's important to explore where is the anger coming from and how can we oust it. It's also important to stay calm. We don't want to be offensive or defensive. And then we want to be able to explain what information can you give to have the other person feel less threatened. When responding to contempt, we want to keep in mind finding the source. What exactly is causing the contempt? We want to reevaluate. How can we address the contemptuous issue? And then obviously building rapport. What angles and where can we agree? And then responding to happiness. So we want to celebrate, smile with them, savor the moment. We want to capitalize, ask for the details, jump into that joy with them, really share that experience. And then express gratitude. Tell them that you're so excited and happy that they wanted to share their happiness with you. Also, the next one is with fear, responding to fear. We want to be able to address what's the threat? What is the source of the discomfort? Then we want to be able to soothe. How can you make it safer? How can we make it safer for them? How can we soothe that discomfort? And then, providing the comfort. How can we reassure them or reevaluate or remove the threat? And if we're not able to remove the threat, then how can we comfort just by being present? The next is responding to surprise. So we decode, we realize that they are feeling surprised. That's the hidden emotion. We want to first clarify, do they know what you know, right? Do they have the information? Then we want to qualify what needs to happen next. And then we need to equate, how can we be on the same chain, same side, same page, to make sure that that surprise is kind of diminished, if it's a negative surprise. Responding to disgust. We want to look for permission. Let them tell you how they really feel. Give them the permission to be vulnerable and to share their truth. We want to be open. Everyone is entitled to his or her own opinion, even if it's different than yours. Having that openness will really validate this person's feelings. And then we want to look to solve. How can we fix the dislike? And then finally, responding to sadness. So we want to be understanding. What is causing the sadness? Can we understand that? Then we want to show empathy. How can you help? How can we help? And then obviously also, giving space. How much time will this person need to recover from this sadness? For some, it might be, a couple seconds. For others, it might be a couple days or a couple weeks or even more. Understanding how to respond to the 7 identified microexpressions and emotions will help us maintain our positive intent when working with our customers and valued stakeholders, who really, in our purposes, are most of the time our families. And once we are able to read those microexpressions, we can better spot hidden emotions and meaning behind the words. Being a decoder is important to people intelligence and interactions with others because it speeds up the process of real connection and understanding emotional needs. And that's so important for many of our stakeholders, especially our students. Understanding hidden emotions and meaning help us get along with more people, which then leads us into the resource theory of human relationships. One theory that has been created by social psychologist Dr. Uriel G. Foa to help people understand the give and take that occurs in relationships is a theory that shares that we all have resources that we give and take. These resources can include physical items like money and food, as well as emotional resources like love, advice, status. As humans, we need both kinds of resources to survive and thrive. Van Edwards shares the Foa and his team proposed that each of us has a hierarchy of 6 needs that originate in our childhood, and if these needs are met, we are able to grow up, gain independence, and feel secure in our surroundings and relationships. And so it's this idea that interactions can be thought of transactions with the idea of give and take in relationships. So the proposed 6 resources include love, service, status, money, goods, and information. And breaking down each of these resources a bit further. Love, the meaning behind love is affection, acceptance, and likability. The meaning behind service would be support, care, and warmth to provide comfort. Status means responsibility, praise, and add titles to evoke pride. Money is coin, currency, or tokens that have been assigned value. And goods are tangible products, objects, or materials. And then the information would be advice, ideas, opinions, and teachers teaching. So kind of take a minute and reflect on this question. During your personal interactions, which resource do you feel you give most frequently? And then on the flip side, which resource do you feel you take most frequently? Van Edwards shared that in many cases, we give what we most want, especially true with the non-physical resources like love, service, and information. I think it's definitely something, worth thinking about and kind of reflecting about. So, why does being mindful of values help with people intelligence and having positive interactions? Well, it helps on a personal level because we can be more aware of our own primary value and understanding of personal needs, which naturally allows us to be more self aware. And then it helps our connection and interaction with others because we are more aware of their needs and able to focus on what they value, even if it isn't what we most value. Understanding primary values is a proactive way to help keep interactions positive. When thinking about value, it also helps to remember that the value is in the eye of the beholder, which doesn't make it right or wrong, just perhaps different than yours. In the book, she shares an anecdotal story about a man who was out walking with his daughter, and they see a boy who has puppies for sale. He's got a little sign that says puppies for sale. And the man's daughter immediately takes notice, and she really wants one. And so the man asks the boy how much the last puppy that's available costs. And the boy replies that the last dog, he's the best one, he's the most special, he's got all these positive traits. And because of that, the dog will cost $1,000. The man, feels like that's just way too much money to spend on a dog, and he tries to negotiate the boy down in price. Meanwhile, his daughter is distraught and crying. He is not successful in negotiating down the price, and he ends up leaving extremely angry because the boy won't budge on, what the boy's value of the last dog is. So a couple of days later, the same man runs across the same boy, and he asks him if he ever ended up selling the dog. And the boy was just so happy and so thrilled, and he's smiling from ear to ear, and he says, "Yep, I sure did." And the man was kind of surprised, and he said, "Really? For $1,000? And the boy said, "Yep, a girl traded me two $500 kitties." And so it just kind of goes to show that, again, value is in the eye of the beholder. And what one person might value, another person won't. And people place values on different things. And also it's important to realize that what their primary value is often their internal motivator. So it's just kind of, again, something interesting to keep in mind when working, negotiating, talking through, and, solving conflict or any other type of interaction with others. So while it's important to recognize people's primary value and the meaning behind those values, it also helps to know how and when those people feel worthy. So let's take a look at this slide. So people who primarily value love, they feel worthy when they are included, when they feel liked, when someone appreciates them. For someone whose primary value is service, they feel worthy when they don't have to ask for help, when someone is assisting them with tasks, when someone does a favor for them. For someone whose primary value is status, they feel most worthy when they are praised, when they are given power or credit, and when their accomplishments are recognized. For someone whose primary value is money, they feel worthy when they have a full bank account, when they can afford what they desire, and when they are earning money. For someone whose primary value is goods, they feel worthy when they have a comfortable home or office, when they have lots of assets, and when they are surrounded by tokens or objects from their past. And then the final primary value is information, and people who value that the most feel worthy when they are in the know, when they are told information first, or when they are asked to give an opinion. So moving forward and understanding hidden emotions and then how to reply to that and understanding what people value and how that can work in understanding others, it's also important to know that staying positive while working with difficult people is important. In her book, Van Edwards leans on Miss Gonzalez, who organizes some of the most unique, memorable, and incredible weddings around the world, which are rooted in new love, huge budgets, and obviously complicated by family ties. Gonzalez shared that she is just as often an impromptu counselor as she is a wedding planner, which I think, a lot of us find ourselves in those positions when working in customer service. So with all of her experience working with and for people, she shared that she's been screamed at, hung up on, and blown up at more times than she can count, but that's part of the job, and she loves it. So while we might not always share in her love for being yelled at, we do enjoy the customer service portion of our professions. Otherwise, we would not still be in these roles. Gonzalez also concluded that oftentimes when people are acting in a difficult way, fear is usually driving the behavior. When fear is an underlying motivator, it's important to first prevent good people from becoming difficult, and then secondly, to stop difficult people from becoming impossible. So, knowing that fear is often the motivator behind being difficult, it's important to recognize some real fears that people have. A few considerations include being judged, being rejected, being criticized, being forgotten, or being different. Many of us work directly with parents, and it's interesting to think about how parents have these same fears for their children, and that will oftentimes add other elements to fear, ultimately adding another level of difficulty to approaching the situation. Are there any of these fears that you recognize in yourself? Or perhaps another fear that sometimes unknowingly drives your behavior? Oftentimes, as with Miss Gonzalez's example, we think of difficult people as screaming and yelling. But in reality, there is a variety of behaviors that make it difficult to work through situations with others. Sometimes fear causes us to be people pleasers, to be bossy, to be defensive, to be gossipy, to be avoidant, to be awkward, to be critical, to be negative, to be needy, or even to be dramatic, among others. So, after thinking about a few of these, does your fear usually express itself in a certain way? And if so, how does your fear usually express itself? In reading through the book Captivate, where a majority of this information is derived from, I often found myself reflecting on my personal interactions and the people intelligence. And for me, trying to apply what I'm learning to myself has also helped me be more empathetic and understanding of how the topics may apply to others. Every now and then, especially when working in customer service, we get that one person who seems very emotional and impossible to please. Van Edwards has a specific hack for this in her book. Typically, when someone is emotional and we are not, we try to counterbalance them by staying calm. But this doesn't always work. In fact, it sometimes infuriates an upset person even more. So, an alternate solution is following 3 steps. Help with naming the emotion. Ask yourself, what is this person afraid of? By being able to name the emotion, it shows the other person that they are recognized, accepted, and ultimately just being heard. Oftentimes, being able to identify the emotion opens a release valve for their anxiety, and the fear begins to disengage. Once you have named the emotion, we can try to understand the feeling by asking ourselves, what is this person seeking? The goal here is to unpack emotions behind what is being said. During this phase, we want to gather as much information as possible and help the other person process as much as possible, and then identify their primary value in the situation. Then once we have fully reached the understanding and the feeling stage, we can move forward in trying to transform the fear by asking, what does this person need? It's important to note that we won't be able to transform until the other person is feeling understood. You can tell this when the person begins to talk at a normal pace, their level and their behavior is more rational. While in a perfect world, we will be able to give them what they want, that is not always the case. So oftentimes, like cases like these, it's important to go into the appreciation language mode, basically meaning that the least that we can do is value what the other person is saying and value them as a person, making them feel less alone. We will now watch Vanessa Van Edwards' TED Talk about how our behaviors and emotions are contagious.
Hello, my name is Vanessa, and I am a recovering awkward person. This is me at the peak of what I like to call my plaid vest phase. Luckily, my years of social awkwardness led me to a fascinating career trying to figure out how people work. So what I didn't realize is that many years ago, I would do an experiment that led me right on this stage in front of you here today. My lab researchers and I were curious about TED Talks. We wanted to know, why do some TED Talks go viral and others don't? So we embarked on a huge experiment. We analyzed thousands of hours of TED Talks looking for patterns. Now, I wasn't sure if we would find anything, so we were analyzing body language, hand gestures, vocal variety. We even looked at outfit choices, which made today particularly pressure-filled. And very quickly, there was a pattern in the data that made me curious. And after we coded more and more TED Talks, we realized there was a pattern. Now, before I tell you what that is, I have a personal question for you, which is, when you see someone, what part of the body do you look at first? You can just call it out. What do you look first when you see someone? Face, eyes. So most people, shoes. They're very high. So most people say eyes, face, or mouth. But actually, when we first see someone, the first place we look is the hands. And this is left over from our caveman days. Because if we were approached by a stranger caveman, the first place we looked was the hands to see if they were carrying a rock or a spear. In other words, we wanted to know if we were safe, if they were friend or foe. Now, this actually still remains from caveman days. And when we can't see someone's hands, something interesting happens. So I just did something a little mean to your brain. You should start to feel just a little bit uncomfortable. And the reason for that is because when you can't see my hands, you wonder, what is she doing back there? And then the longer I leave my hands behind my back, you get more and more distracted because you can't see them. And eventually your brain is just screaming, can she just bring her hands out from behind her back? And the moment I bring them back out, it feels so much better. And this is because our brain knows that if we can't see hands, we can't see intention. And what we found is when we compared the most viewed TED Talks side by side with the least viewed TED Talks, we found a pattern with hand gestures. Specifically, on average, the most popular TED Talkers use an average of 465 hand gestures in 18 minutes. Yes, we painstakingly counted every single one. I have 465 prepared for you today. And the least popular TED Talkers use an average of 272 hand gestures, almost half. What's happening here? So when TED speakers take the stage, they're showing you first, friend, 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 friend. You'll notice when I walked out on the stage, I waved. I was saying friend, 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 friend. And the other thing that TED speakers do, see if this looks familiar. So they come into the red dot and they do something like this. Today, I want to talk to you about a big idea. I'm going to break it down into 3 different areas that are going to change your life. Right? So the most viral TED Talkers seem to sit in the same way with these hand gestures, because what they're doing is they're showing you, I know my content so well that I can speak to you on 2 different tracks. I can speak to you with my words, but I can also explain my concepts with my hands. And this way, they underline their concepts with their words. For example, if I were to say, today, I have a really big idea. It's huge. You laugh and you're like, Vanessa, it's so small. It's not very big. And that is because your brain gives 12.5 times more weight to hand gestures. So today, I have a really, really big idea. And I'm going to explain it to you in 3 different ways. My big idea is that we are contagious. Specifically, as humans, we are constantly sending and decoding body language signals. We also do this emotionally and chemically. To explain this, I have a rather disgusting but very fascinating study. So in this study, researchers collected sweat pads from people who ran on the treadmill. Then they collected sweat pads from skydivers on their first time skydive. 2 very different kinds of sweat. Here's the disgusting part. Then they had poor, unsuspecting participants. I know. They had unsuspecting participants in the lab smell these sweat pads while they were in an fMRI machine. Here's where it gets interesting. Even though the participants had no idea what they were smelling, the ones that smelled the skydiving sweat pads had their fear response in their brain activated. In other words, they caught the fear. This means that our emotions are contagious. Our fear is contagious. Our confidence is contagious. And this begs the big question. If our emotions are contagious, how do we make sure that we're infecting people with the right ones? So I believe that we can be contagious in 3 different ways. The first one is non-verbally. Now, to test this idea, I did a very simple experiment in the streets of Portland, Oregon. What I did is I stood in the street and I looked up at nothing. And I wanted to see if people would catch or mirror my nonverbal. So you can see this video. I stand in the streets looking at nothing. And slowly, one by one, I infect people walking by. And slowly, we begin to gather a crowd. So this poor woman, she was standing there with me, and we're standing there, and remember, we're looking at nothing. I just want to improve it. And we're standing, and I'm going, how long are we gonna stand here? Who's gonna break first? And after about 40 seconds, we're looking, and she leans over and she says, is he gonna jump? And this experience taught me that we catch emotions and then we create rationales for why we've caught that emotion. Now, this is actually a good thing. As humans, this keeps us safe. Dr. Paul Ekman has studied something called the microexpression. It's a universal facial expression, and he's discovered there are 7 of them. Across genders and races, we all make the same expression when we feel an intense emotion. This is the fear microexpression. So fear is a really important emotion because we want to catch it from someone else to warn us if something's about to go wrong. And this facial expression also keeps us safe. So imagine for a second that you're walking and you see a snake. Your eyelids and your eyebrows jump out of the way so you can take in as much of the environment as possible. Is there another snake? What's my escape route? Then your mouth opens so you can take in oxygen in case you have to fight, yell for help, or flee. We make this face before we consciously realize we've seen a snake. Now, what's interesting about it is you should be starting to feel a little bit anxious. And that is because when we see other people have fear, if we saw this face in the subway, we would be like, what's wrong? What's going on? Because it keeps us safe. So I want you to try it with me. So open your eyes as wide as possible. Raise your eyebrows up. Very good. Now take in a sharp breath. Perfect. Do you feel anxious? What's interesting about facial expressions is they cause our emotions. So not only do our emotions cause our face, but our face also causes our emotions. It's called the facial feedback hypothesis. So when we see someone with this face, we catch their emotion, and then we are ready to fight, flee, or yell for help. Luckily, this also works with positive emotions. So one of the faces behind me is a real happiness microexpression, and one of them is fake. So the real happiness microexpression is when the smile reaches all the way up into these upper crow's feet muscles, those upper cheek muscles. And this is really important because when you tell a frenemy good news and they say they're happy for you, but they're not really? It looks like this. Oh yeah, I'm so happy for you. So try the fake expression for me first. So just try this fake smile, only on the bottom half of the face. You can even go, It doesn't feel so good, right? It feels inauthentic. Now go all the way up into your eyes. Smile all the way up into the upper cheek muscles. That should feel so much better. So what's interesting about this facial expression is it causes our own happiness. And we also catch it when we see it. Researchers at the University of Finland looked at these 2 facial expressions. They had participants look at photos of people with real happiness and fake happiness. They found that when they showed participants pictures of the real happiness smile, those emotions caught the positive emotions, and they themselves had a positive mood change. But when they looked at the face with the fake happiness smile, they caught nothing. In other words, if we show up to events that we're ambivalent about, interact with people that we don't really like, we become less memorable. This doesn't just happen in person, it also happens on the phone. So I work with a lot of different clients, corporate clients who are on the phone all the time. They said, Vanessa, I get being happy in person, but how about on the phone? So we decided to do an experiment where we had participants in our lab record different versions of their hello, the first impression on the phone. We wanted to know if people could hear happiness, sadness, or anger. So we had people record different versions of their hello with happiness, sadness, anger, and while power posing. We wanted to see if they would sound different. So I want to play you 2 different versions of hello and see if you can guess which one is the happy hello. Are you ready? All right, same person. Here's A.
Hello?
Here's B.
Hello?
How many people think A is the happy hello? How many people think B is the happy hello? Very good. We can hear this difference. We can hear this microexpression. Now, I thought this was interesting, but I wanted to take it a step further. So we devised a second part of our experiment where we had participants in our lab listen to these recordings and rate that person on likability. We wanted to see if the happiness microexpressions or the anger microexpressions or the power posing expressions did better. Here's what happened. After we asked people, I do like this person a lot, I like this person a little, or I do not like this person, we found that the happiness microexpressions across all trials for both men and women, they became more likable. Whereas the same person who made an anger or sadness microexpression were less likable. This is the happy side effect of having your confidence be contagious. Not only do you infect someone else with that happiness, you also become more likable. We talked about nonverbal, and I have to talk about what comes after the hello. How do we infect confidence verbally? So in this study we did in Portland, Oregon, we took 500 speed networkers, and we asked each of these speed networkers to go through a conversation starter round, 8 of these rounds. So we assigned each participant a conversation starter to have with a stranger. Then we set up cameras in all corners of the room, and we analyzed each of these speed rounds for patterns. We were looking for body language patterns, leans, nods, laughs, smiles, confidence. We were also looking for volume differences. In a really good conversation, usually the volume goes up. In a really awkward, bad conversation, there's lots of silences and the volume goes down. And we also asked each of the participants to rate the conversation starters. We wanted to know which ones produced the highest quality of conversation. What we found is that the conversation starters that worked centered on this little chemical called dopamine. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter that we produce when we feel pleasure or when we get a reward. And I noticed that most of our chit chat that we have at parties or networking events is the same. It sounds like this. So, what do you do? Where are you from? Live around here? Well, I'm gonna go get some more wine. It's great talking to you. Those conversations happened over and over again. It was almost as if they were socially scripted. My brain was on autopilot. What we found is the worst ranked conversation starters, the ones that got the lowest ratings, the ones that produced the lowest volume, the ones that got the most leans away, worst head nods, and worst micro expressions, those were the ones that we use the most. What do you do? How are you? Where are you from? From a physiological perspective, have no effect, no pleasure. So what we tried was to find conversation starters that could spark or create some kind of excitement. Can you verbally trigger dopamine? And we found that the brain is really interesting. If you ask the brain a question, it tends to look for hits and not misses. What I mean by this is if you ask someone, been busy lately? Their brain immediately looks for all the hits of been busy. They think about all the negative things that have happened, the stress, the busyness, all the bad things in their life. Whereas if you ask someone, working on anything exciting recently? Their brain immediately begins to look for all the hits of excitement. They start thinking of all the good, all the happy things, all the excitement that's going on in their own life. And that does 2 things. 1, it creates pleasure for them. You're literally asking them to borrow excitement from other places in their life and bring it to the situation that you're in. And the other thing that it does is it makes you more memorable. Dr. John Medita found that dopamine, when it's triggered in verbal conversation, makes a mental post-it note. In other words, when you ask someone else to think of what's exciting in their life, the happy side effect is that you become more memorable. So here's my big challenge for today. Instead of using the typical, what do you do, how are you, and where are you from, let's banish those conversation starters forever, and let's try ones that ask the brain to look for hits of excitement. Try working on anything exciting these days. Have any vacations coming up? Anything good happen today? I think this is the greatest gift we can give our fellow human beings. We are asking them to flip into optimism. We're triggering dopamine and excitement and getting them off autopilot. The last way that we're contagious is emotionally. So this study is one of my favorites. In this experiment, they asked students to sing the song, Don't Stop Believing, into an accuracy software. Now, this is a very nerve-wracking experiment. They're graded on vocal tone, words, and they're given no preparation. But they did 3 different trials of this experiment. First, they had them just walk into the room and sing into an accuracy software. The second group got into the room and had to say out loud, I'm nervous. And the last group had to walk into the room and say, I'm excited. They found that this simple reframe, the nervous group got 53% accuracy, the control group got 69, but the I'm excited group got 80% accuracy. Why? Anxiety and excitement are very similar emotions. The only difference is mindset. So my challenge for you today is to think about how you want to infect people. When you want to harness incitement or trigger excitement, ask dopamine-worthy conversation starters, use more hand gestures, make authentic smiles, and never pick up the phone in a bad mood. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to end on a note of excitement. I want to make you really infectious. So what we're going to do to end this talk is on the count of 3, with all of the energy you can muster, I want you to yell out, I'm excited. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm excited! You rock, Ted.
Okay, so hopefully you all enjoyed that TED Talk. I know that's one of my favorites, and I think it's just so exciting to see, like, we have so much power to be contagious and to infect people in a positive way. And I just think that's, I don't know, just a really neat thing. So as we kind of come to a close here, just one reflection, to think about a time when you were working with someone who was acting in a difficult manner. Recall what that situation was about, and then try to identify what that person may have been afraid of. Because, as it was stated, a lot of times, negative behavior is often rooted in fear. Then try to understand what that emotion was and then how they were feeling and perhaps why they were feeling that way. And then here's the reflection piece. Reflect on a way that you could have tried to transform that fear, or to perhaps better understand that situation, or to be contagious in a positive way during that situation, that difficult situation. Some takeaways for our presentation today is really just knowing that people show microexpressions, which are really identifying hidden emotions. There's 7 main microexpressions. Being able to recognize hidden emotions is important to connecting with people, and then how we respond to them is also important. Knowing what we value is important for self-awareness. Knowing what others value helps with understanding and communications. When others are behaving in a difficult way, they are often acting out of fear. When working with difficult people, it's important to name the emotion, understand the feeling, and then transform the fear. And then really just remembering that your positivity is contagious in certain situations. That can be really helpful. So again, here was our reading, Captivate the Science of People, and some more resources specifically that Dr. Sears had used. So thank you all so much again for your time today. I hope that you found this presentation valuable and you're able to apply it to both your personal and your professional lives. Thank you again.